material. There's a gesture towards the object, a movement on the object, a motion with the material. There's a pause, a rotating gaze, years of observing, black holes into a minute, final project, idiosyncratic. If I give it to you or you buy it from me, it doesn't make you a materialist. Materialism is an ugly word. Materials shaped by nimble and inspired hands, hands that know and never know is beauty. There's movement, there's an object, there's material, there's a gesture.
Okay, so today we're going to learn how to do what I call box plates, for lack of a better word, I suppose. So we're going to be able to create our own shape, one that you like. And we want to be in the range of, say, 6 or 7 by 6 or 7. So I guess this one, so when we do it wet, it should be bigger. Then of course it's going to shrink down. So we want to be in the range of, somewhere in 6 by 7 sort of spacing to have a decent sized sort of vessel there. So here's some examples, some different sort of shapes, right? Sort of long curve here, a couple little plates right there, right? It's got some feet on there. We have this shape too, which is off a template that I really actually like. It's sort of very similar, like a parallelogram. A couple straight walls, maybe a little bit of curve on this one, and then some curve here. And then we have this one too, with just a sort of rectangular shape that has been pushed out, on the side there to form another little triangle there. So we'll do some of that stuff. So we'll take a piece of paper and, so this is 8 by 11. So if we fit a decent sized one within this to create a template for our slab, then we will be in good shape right there. So first things first, I want to decide. So if, maybe I might just start with some lines and, and have something coming off it. Maybe I don't want it to be perfectly parallel, so I'll have it sort of come off in a little bit of an angle there, and then maybe think about creating some curve. So, I can use something like this, right, to kind of create a curve. So I have this sort of curve there. Maybe that's good. Maybe it might be interesting. And I could actually put the curve on the other side and then decide about, well, maybe I don't really want that, such a curve. So maybe what I really want is to have some of this stuff maybe not be such a, and just kind of fill it in and have it end up being more of a curve like that. You can also use a compass if you have a compass, or if you don't have a compass or can't find your compass, like me, who seem to be missing a couple of them. You can always take a pair of scissors, tape your pencil to it, and now we got a compass. So I can draw my curves with that, so I can kind of make them, put and sort of see. See how that looks, maybe a little bit of a wider sort of arc there, and something like that. And now once I've worked this out, then I can come and cut out my shape.
Now I have my template.
So now I have my shape. So once I have my template cut out, then I want to grab my slab. So I want to have a slab that I've made about 3/8 thick, and I need to let it set up enough to where I can do this. And see, it's bending a little bit, but it's still holding its shape. So it's still pliable, but I can pretty much stand it up there and it's not flopping down. So it's got to be wet enough that it will still bend a little bit. And if I take my nail into it, I'm going to still have a little bit of a mark there. Okay, I can still push into it. It's not so dry. So I want to make sure one more smoothing of this. My rib that I cut out from an old health card. Okay, now it's kind of ready. So I want to make sure my slab is big enough that I can fit my template on it, plus have enough to make the strips. So I might need to either make sure I do one big slab or make one slab that's big enough to accommodate my template. And then maybe I make another slab and I make sure it's a little bit longer and I can cut out like 1 1/4 inch wide strips for the walls of this piece and have some scrap left over maybe to do the feet. So have this. Now, over time, because we're doing this a lot, if we have a really nice, shape that someone comes up with or something, we can cut it out of, what's really good is old sort of commercial flooring. So if you ever go behind like a flooring business and they'll have some scrap, but the commercial, the thicker stuff, if it's thrown to the dumpster, it's really good for making templates for clay because it's, pretty much plastic vinyl that's just going to last for a long time. Where this piece of paper works great for a few that you can do in the immediate, but it's going to get kind of wet and sort of have some problems after a while. So this has ended up being one of my favorite. Now when I cut it out, because I let this set up, I don't want to be on the immediate edge here. I want to be away from the edge. So I'm going to try to push it sort of towards a corner here. This is probably going to be the best spot, maybe here, to where I'm still going to have a decent amount for strips for the walls to accommodate all of this. Right? So maybe really this is the spot right here. So this edge here, I don't want to use that edge because it's been setting up. This is going to be the driest part. So I want to have when I cut, I want to have some fresh sort of edges there. Now when we cut, it's going to be really, really important that at this point forward, as we're doing these sort of stiff slabs that we sort of set up, we got to make sure that when we cut, our blade is as vertical as possible, especially when we do these walls, because if we do them at an angle when we cut, then they're going to sit on top of the piece at an angle and they won't line up right. So I really got to focus on this. Keep that blade nice and vertical. So now I have my shape cut out. I put this to the side, and now I'll measure out my walls here. So I want to have 1 1/4 inch wide sort of walls. So I want to make sure I get the most out of this. And really my longest part here is in here. So I actually want to cut my strips out of these two sections here. And I should have 4, and that should be enough, plus some scrap left over to do some kind of foot system on the bottom. So again, I don't want to use this edge, so I want to be away from that edge. So I'm going to start over here where this is a fresh cut. And I'll cut my straight edge off of that. And then I will go and I will measure 1 1/4. Take my little paper clip that I used to score. 1 1/4. 1 1/4. Line them up. Maybe I should double check, right? Measure twice. Cut once. Goes there. And it's important. I want my walls to be the same height. Otherwise, when they line up, they'll be a little bit wacky there. 1 1/4. 1 1/4. Okay, so now I have my 4 walls here, my piece, and then I have some extra here for maybe I might need to do another wall if something happens, and also have some extra scrap to do some kind of foot system on the bottom. So I'll start off by scratching, scoring up this sort of one side here. And I will set my first sort of wall on top of that. This should be long enough. So I'm going to shift it into position. Now there's a curve on this piece, and so I want this to actually go a little bit past that, this leg here, come up. I just real quickly for now sort of run that there, and then I will just kind of shave that to match this right there. Now here, I actually want that to be just short by 3/8 thick, which is as thick as my slab there. So I'm just going to take one of them, march it up against it, and then use that to mark and cut. Try to cut straight down this extra piece off. I want them to be offset, so if I start from the edge here, as it comes over, I want it to be just short. So this next one's going to start there and then be just short, and then come here and be just short and stuff like that. So I want to sort of work like that. It's a lot. It'll be much better if it ends up being sort of offset. So that being said, it's really better to do this next one here because it'll come all the way. This one will then be short, and it'll come all the way to this edge and then come all the way to this edge. So once I have that first one done, I won't have to sort of set it up and mark the difference there. So then I can just go. So this next one, what I want to do is kind of lay it up against it and then figure out what that sort of angle is and mark that, because it's not sort of straight. It's just got a little bit of an angle. So maybe it's in the 20s as far as degree goes. It's not a 45, but it might be less than even half of 45. So sort of mark it up there. And then I got to score this edge because now it's going to attach to here. And then I got to score all of those other edges, everywhere it's going to touch. So this should be pliable. It needs to bend a little bit to fit this curve. If it can't bend, if it's too hard to bend, or if it starts to crack when you bend it, it's too dry. And then just kind of shift it up. Make sure that this corner here is shifted back and forth. Make sure it sort of lines up with the edge there. And that sort of curve it's got. And then I look at this line here as my guide, and I just cut that down. And then I just keep going with the other two. Okay, now that I have my walls all on, I've just kind of done a little bit of pushing and sealing and stuff and smoothing on the outside there. I can do a little bit more later. But the next thing I want to do is I want to reinforce all these seams here. So to do that, I'm just going to make some really small coils and fill that in. But we have 8 seams here. We have these bottom seams for each wall, 4 walls, and then we have these 4 verticals that I want to get on the inside of each one. And a couple reasons. One, they're really going to act as, let's say, a bracket. You know, these 2 pieces of slabs that are together and are putting a little coil in there is going to act as a little bracket between them. It just really is going to assure that this all stays together. I mean, we can be pretty confident from doing a good job of scoring and slipping and stuff and attaching it and drying it very slowly, of course. But I want to really assure that it is also going to be sort of attached so they don't move too much, hopefully, in the firing, expansion and contraction of the heat. But also, as a practical source of a piece like this, it makes it a lot easier to clean if the inside corners are rounded. So that's the other sort of point there. So I just want to make sure then also I use some fresh clay, nothing that I've already used that's dried out. And you don't really need much. I really just need very, very thin coil. Just about this thin. And since this is so wet and fresh, and then on the inside where I have those seams, a lot of water is actually already squeezed out. But I might just make sure, just to make sure, I don't want to have a whole lot of water because it'll make it too messy, but just a little bit of excess moisture, really for these that have set up. This doesn't need it. Now I'm going to first push it down with my finger as I go along inside the seam. And this will actually sort of stretch out longer as I do this. So I'll get more out of this piece than just its current length right now. So I'm just going to start going in and just sort of push it down to that corner real gently because I don't want this to push my wall out. Just a little bit of pressure to kind of smash it down in there. Maybe I shouldn't use that word smash, but kind of compress it and I got it all the way over here. So now I'll do this, and I'll do those two, and then I'm going to go back and smooth it. So in the end, I don't want you to be able to tell when you look on the inside of that there was any coil put in there. It'll just look nice and sort of smooth and rounded on the inside without any sort of look like someone came along and added a coil. I don't want the evidence of me adding that coil to be shown. I want it to be just sort of blended in. Okay, so now once I have my inside sort of all reinforced and smoothed out, and I can always go back a little bit more here and there, as long as it stays sort of damp. One thing I do want to work on is these edges. Kind of take a little bit of water and just kind of make sure they're sort of rounded off. You can also, sometimes to make things a little faster, take the back end of your knife that you're using and just kind of run it along so that it sort of kind of cuts a little angle there, and then you can just come back and hit that up and you'll have a nice sort of rounded edge. So that'll make it sort of more efficient, a little faster if you do it that way. And I don't have to necessarily worry about that right now. So then I want to sort of go take a look at my sides here. Places like this where maybe I don't have it even, I can still see the difference between the slabs there. So I'll take my sort of old card here and use that to come along and sort of scrape that along there so I can get that real even looking, and then come back and kind of polish it up with a little bit of a water. So I'll go all along there, so even on these edges here too, kind of trying to make sure that they look real even, kind of hide any sort of evidence of where the joints come together. I want to sort of do that. So I'll go through and do all of that like that. All the way through, and come back and do a little polishing, a little water. So the other issue then here is finishing off the bottom. Besides coming along and doing stuff like that. Again, I found too, it's nice if you can put a little edge to it. So if I take my knife and I run it just along there. Now I can't go too far because we only have that much thickness right in here, right? So I might want to just take a little bit off, kind of like what I was doing with the inside of the thing, but run this back alongside, but this time I want to cut more off. So hold it at a little bit of an angle and try to remain real even. And just cut a little bit of an edge on there to make it look a little nicer. And I don't want to start and stop. Once I start, I want to continue all the way sort of through. So not do what I just did. To try to make sure that I don't have like a little spot that's kind of a start and stop there. So just remember, do as I say, not what I do all the time. Come through, right there in that edge. I gotta hold this real steady. Just put a little bit of an edge on it. And just come back and hit that. And have a nice sort of rounded, clean, rounded edge there. And I gotta figure out how to deal with the feet. So, there's times where I've done different things. Used a mold to kind of put some feet on there. They just end up looking kind of heavy, stuff like that. The cleanest way is really to sort of create little like pyramids that are sort of, you know, shooting through, because it'll work with this edge and then it'll come out. And you always really want to have 3 spots if you can. So we know from taking our geometry class that 3 points make not a triangle, yes, a triangle, but really we'd like to say 3 points make a plane. Remember that from your geometry class. So when it sits down, it won't wobble. If we have 4 and it warps a little bit, it's going to have a wobble in it. But even if it warps in the firing with 3, it's always going to settle. Now, sometimes shapes don't warrant that. This might not look good. I could put something here, here, and then here. It'd be okay. But really this would look best if it's just got 2 sort of long pieces like that. So one way to sort of make that would be those triangles would be to use some coils. Just roll it out. Slow down, make sure it's even. And then maybe kind of measure it, not that much. That should just be about right. So then I'll tap the sides just for now, fix those later, just to keep them sort of tight. And then I can use something. I could use maybe the knife. I think this will work better. And just sort of at an angle, flatten that. So push down, come back over it to kind of keep it even. So there's one side. Then I'll flip it. Push down, come back the other side. Oops. And then come back across the first side. And I should have this sort of piece that, you know, works like as an angle there. And just keep working on it until I have something I can be satisfied with. The same thing, push down on the side. When I have it in front of me like this, it's a little easier to see what's going on. Not too worried about the edges here because I won't probably use them. So, shorter one and a longer one will work well for this. So then what I'm going to want to have is this sort of following along this line here, following along that, and so it's just slightly in, falls along the curve. And then here too, I'm going to sort of cut it at an angle. I think I want to have it off the same amount, the distance from here to there as I do on this backside. And I want to cut that angle that works with this line too. And then same thing here. So line it up, get the best parts here. Just sort of in there. And then I'll mark where it's going to go. That over. Score that. Score this back side. This is the dry part that I'm really worried about. That's why I wanted to have the water. Then shift it into position. You want to have enough water so that when I push down like this, some of it excretes out, sort of squeezes out the side there, and I can use that to kind of smooth it on there, stuff like that. And then do the same thing here. Now, when I go to dry this, the first night I want to have it totally wrapped, because I'm going to have, we basically have, seam that goes all the way around, plus these vertical seams. So we have, if we consider those separate, then we have 8 seams, and then we have 2 more, 10 places where we have attached things together. So they need to be, this thing needs to be totally wrapped for the night. And I want to have it upside down because I want this to set up a little bit before I put the weight of it, because this is pretty stiff. And these pieces of clay here are kind of dry, or kind of wet, I mean. So they're pretty wet. So they're going to crush down if I put too much pressure on them. So let them set up. The next day I can come back in after I've unwrapped it, and I can go back over, take something like this here, sort of clean it up, make it look a little straighter, and all that. And have a nice sort of, peak right here, sort of around there, but it just works better to have this sort of visual as it's sitting to where here, we have this little edge here, and then we have this piece here that has this little edge that comes down, sort of follows it and kind of hides it a little bit. So it's nice when we have small feet or appropriate feet that kind of make the piece look like it's sort of floating off the surface. So I still need to come back and do, more of my little angle here. But I can do this the following day if I've got this nice and wrapped, it'll still be damp. And then I'm going to let it dry real slow, have a sort of loose covered plastic over it for days, and then, just make sure everything's sort of good, and make sure my name has been carved into the bottom of this, because if we don't want to annoy our poor ceramics teacher when he gets stuff delivered to him at the school and it's got no name on it. So let's not do that anymore. So there you go. You can get real creative with your template. You get more complex if you want to. It's just a matter of being careful how many bends you have, how many different seams you have, and stuff like that. But we've had all kinds of different things being made before. So go ahead and get creative, and figure out the template you want to use, and you can make a different one. You're going to make 2 of these. You can make a different one for each one, or you can have a pair. So whatever you sort of want. That's okay, but we want to stay in this range of about 6 by 7 inches or so, somewhere in that range. So we don't want to get real small. There's other ways we can also, put the feet on. So using our leftover scrap, one thing I did is I cut 2 1/4-inch strips. So I can use that, and so as long as we make sure this doesn't get too dry as we're working, these bend pretty nicely. I could do a couple runners there, I can do them on the side. And with those, it may be still a little wobbly as it comes out, but we can always kind of figure out where the highest point is and grind it down and get it to sort of settle. The other idea too is that we can cut some basically squares out, cut them into triangles, and put some little corner pieces on there too. The thing to remember is this has been sitting out for a while, so every time I go back to use this excess slab I have, I want to kind of cut a fresh edge. So I want to get that drier edge away and just be working on the parts here and stay away from these other edges that have kind of dried up and stuff. So now that I have that straight edge there, I can then go back and kind of create a -90-degree angle here. All right, so I have a square edge there to work off of. And then probably do I'm going to mark 2 inches.
And cut my straight edge there. Should be. I'm doing this fast. This isn't going to be all that perfect.
But now I should have a couple almost squares that are about 2 inches by 2 inches or so. And then we can cut them into triangles by just going across. And I should have 4 triangles, these 4 corners. So now I can work on that idea, right? And that actually looks pretty decent, kind of works with the piece as we have these sort of corners here. Now, what I would want to do is actually bring this sort of up, come back and maybe cut a little bit of a curve on these corners here to kind of match a more of a rounded corner there. So I just shave off some of that. And now we're getting to be a little bit more of a rounded look there. And you know, you want them to kind of come in just a bit. So same thing here, we're going to kind of just take off a little bit of that so they kind of work that round corner. So just keep going back. And then it's really important when this stuff is dried up, this really needs to be scored. You know, so both these places have sort of dried up and set up, and especially this, our scrap has maybe been sitting out while we're working. It's really important to score. So I will always, with these kind of pieces too, is score them up, get my water or slip, whatever I'm using, and then go back and do it again. And then have this really sitting out while then I do this piece after I've traced it out, and then go back. So it even has a little time to kind of resaturate a little bit, and then you're going to move it and sort of shift it back and forth and get it into your position. Now these two, you know, I come back in here, and it may actually be beneficial to, once you've got them all cut, sort of design them to go, and before I put them on, maybe to use the back end of my knife here again, we did before, and kind of round off these edges that are going to be the, essentially be the bottom of the piece, but as we're looking at it right now, is the top of our pieces. So I just sort of scrape a little angle on the side, come back with a little bit of water, get them kind of rounded off, and then sort of put them on. And that's going to look nice. It's going to look kind of match these edges right here. So those are some various sort of ways of putting these feet on, right? This too, that may look really good also. Sort of cut, I would cut that as an angle. Sometimes you might need to just kind of, you know, make your feet, kind of set them up, a couple different versions maybe, and see which ones you think look best before kind of make a real decision. This is nice and sort of simple, right? And I may want to go and work on these too. Before I put them on, because it's a little easier to kind of do this now while it's off, and I can kind of manipulate where it goes and stuff. And then clean up those edges. And then kind of get a better look. What does that look like? Kind of follows the curve. Kind of nice, clean, round, simple. Could do things like that. So those are sort of, you know, 3 different ways of kind of putting sort of some kind of foot service, system on it. So we want to have, if you want to have it a little elevated, it's much better. We don't really want this big flat surface to be sitting on a hot kill shelf in the firing. It's better if it's up a little bit. The cool down process will be optimal for the piece as it comes out of the glaze fire. So that's what we might want to try. Remember, you can go ahead and get creative in your design for your box plate. You can, over the years, people have come up with all kinds of different shapes, right? It's kind of nice sort of, you know, basically take a rectangle and then just start sort of working out some curves and stuff like that. It works pretty well. This is a little simple design. It's got a kind of neat little curve there, different. Complex, right? Lots of curves to kind of work in, but not impossible. People have done it. This turtle, you know, basically just draw 3 circles and then use the outside edge here. Works pretty well. It's a neat little piece. This is a nice one. I've done lots of these. I like that sort of shape. Pretty simple. Kind of like diamond shape here, you know, sort of Superman emblem. Here's another sort of rectangle that just has a couple little cuts there, you know, make a simple little shape there. And then here, I'm not sure, this is some kind of, you know, old, you know, Celtic warrior or something. I don't know if I've ever seen this character before, but someone wanted to make a box plate out of it. So it's pretty cool. All kinds of different things you can do. So just go ahead and get after it.